Welcome back to Biz Politics, and I do apologise, it has been a long time. But look, I wanted to do a big episode on the 3 by-elections, so that's why I was waiting until all 3 of them are done so I could do a super episode, as I'd like to call it. We're going to be discussing the Farrer by-election, the Nepean by-election, and the most recent one from yesterday, the Stafford by-election. And the Stafford by-election, we still have results coming in for that one, but I'm pretty sure we've determined the result there. I want to start off with the big one, Farrer. The resignation of Susan Lee caused the vacancy in the seat of Farrer, and I got to say, this one was a real political earthquake. One Nation won its first ever lower house federal seat in the House of Representatives. So look, David Farley ran an incredible campaign. Michelle Milthorpe she managed to get a small swing towards her in the primary votes, but a swing away from her in the two-party preferred. I think there's still some votes being counted, but of course we've determined the winner was David Farley with One Nation, and he had 39.5% of the primary vote. Michelle Milthorpe came in second with 28.5%. Third place, we had the Liberal candidate, Raisa Bukowski, on 12.4% of the vote, and the Nationals around 9 to 10% of the vote. And the other parties, the Greens, Legalise Cannabis, all those in a few independents, I think, as well, just further back. Labor did not run a candidate in this one, but the two-party preferred. This one's very interesting. I think this is now considered a safe One Nation seat. Their first ever seat is considered safe. David Farley on 54% and Michelle Milthorpe on 46% in the TCP count. It wasn't a by-election loss. It was political demolition. They'd absolutely demolished the Liberal vote. I think towards the start of the count, towards the midway through counting, I think even the Nationals were ahead of the Liberal Party. So I think that really goes to show how disconnected the Liberal Party has been with their voters in Farrer, and how ready people are to move on to One Nation. But look, the Liberal vote did collapse more than 20 points. One Nation did surge, and it is conservative heartland. I think most likely it was either going to always go to One Nation or the independent Michelle Milthorpe. Milthorpe did run last year against Susan Lee and did manage to get a nice swing against Lay over to her. Okay, so just a few other things to clarify. This had been a coalition-held seat since 1949. The Liberals did come third. That's literally just, they've dropped back. And Susan Lee did release a statement, and which we haven't heard from her since, when did she resign? February 27th. I do remember the day. We haven't heard from her in a few months. But so she did release a statement saying, look, she agrees with what Angus Taylor said. The Liberal Party either needs to, I think it was, change or die. And yeah, she said she agrees with that still, and it does relate to the Farrer by-election results. Okay, let's move on to Nepean. Here we go. 2nd of May 2026. It was caused by the resignation of former MP Sam Groth. The Liberals held it comfortably, but Labor did not contest this by-election. I think in the primary votes, I think the Liberal Party did have a swing against it, which was interesting to see there. But just based off what I'm seeing right now, so the Liberal Party was Darren Hercus with One Nation as well. He came in second overall, which was great. I think this was always going to go back to the Liberal Party. Look, One Nation had a good chance, but I do think it was, I don't know. It was always going to go back to the Liberal Party, in my opinion. It was a safe Liberal seat. Sam Groth had held it since 2022, and I think it was the Mornington Peninsula around there, and the candidate that the Liberal Party ran, he was well connected with that area. He was I think he was a councillor or the mayor of the Mornington Shire Peninsula. So that's I think they chose a good candidate for that one. But I'll get the final results right up here. The two-party preferred count, with Anthony Marsh from the Liberal Party winning it with 63.2% of the two-party preferred count. There was a 6.9% swing to the Liberal Party, and Tracy Hutchinson with 36.8% of the vote. In two-party preferred. Darren Hercus with One Nation came in second place in the primaries with 24.5% of the vote. So a sizable chunk adding over to One Nation. And the Liberal Party had a 9.4 swing away from it. So, look, but that's interesting because of course the Labor Party did not run a candidate. The Greens ran a candidate, and a few other tinier parties. I think even Reform AU popped up there, which is I'll get into that a bit later. But look, we have the Liberal Party having a sizable chunk swing away from it. Yet they had in the two-party preferred 6.9% swing over to it. So it looks like the preferences did work in their favour. But yeah, so there's not too much there. Look, I think the funny thing is that Sam Groth if he resigned a few months later, they would have actually they wouldn't have held the by-election. Because of course we have the November election for Victoria, which is coming up in November. Yeah, but look, Nepean is a strong Liberal hold with Labor absent. Don't really read into that too much. But yeah, it's a plus 6.9% two-party preferred swing. And Anthony Green's commentary is really good, so I suggest you go check that out. But Nepean was a warning for Labor, I'm pretty sure. Well, I'm calling it. It was a warning for Labor. The fact that they didn't run a candidate showed that they didn't really want to waste their time and energy into this. And the fact that the Liberal Party had a strong result, I think shows that this is going to be won in November, this seat. I think that was always going to be a given. Darren Hercus did run a good campaign as well. But on to the last by-election that I want to cover for today's episode, and the only by-election that I'm going to cover in Queensland. Stafford. It was caused by the death of former MP Jimmy Sullivan, but Labor only just survived. That's right. This is the first by-election no, it's the second Queensland by-election. I think the first one, I'm casting my mind back to November now. I'll get back to that. I know Wade Chiesa. He was the one who won it. It was caused by the resignation of one of the Qatar's Australian Party members of Parliament. Look, I'm really going off my memory here. But Labor only just survived. We don't have final numbers yet, but I'm going to call it for Labor with 51.2% of the vote and over 75% of the polls counted. Fiona Hammond with the LNP on 48.8%. She was leading in the start, but the margin is only about 700 to 770 votes. Counting is still finalised. But I think this is a warning for Labor. If you look at the results, oh goodness, we have a lot to unpack here. Stafford by-election, let's get the full results up. It's ALP likely. We have plus 2.4% to the Liberal National Party, minus 8.1% for the Labor Party with Luke Richmond running. This was a Labor seat, and then Jimmy Sullivan defected. I think he was an independent Labor, or just an independent. But look, I think the Liberal National Party being in government, this is interesting to see. I don't know about the opposition in Queensland. I don't know too much about Queensland politics. All I really know is that the Liberal National Party is in government there, and they only have one chamber, which is the lower house, which is I think it's House of Assembly. Legislative Assembly, they call it up there. But yeah, it's nice to see some change in the way Queenslanders have been voting. This is a safe, well, not safe, but I want to call it, this is mostly a Labor-held seat, with the only time it going to the LNP was in 2012 with Campbell Newman and his absolute smashing landslide victory. But that government only lasted for one term. But there we go. There was a 2014 by-election, and the ALP did retain it there. 2015, 2017, 2020, and 2024, and now 2026, I'm calling it, are all ALP. But I think that there's something that the ALP should worry about, is that they have such a big swing away from them. I think looking here, it's gone to the Liberal Party. It's also gone to one of the independents and possibly legalised cannabis QLD. The only other one that did plus was the Animal Justice Party, from what I'm looking here, but they're only 2.1%. And of course, there was a few other independents. There's a Libertarian who won. But One Nation didn't run in this one. I think that was a smart choice from One Nation. I think this was Look, it was going to be a difficult fight. It was going to be the right fighting itself with One Nation versus the Liberal National Party, and it wouldn't have looked good for One Nation if they came out of this damaged. So it would not have done well on their reputation, and I think it's safe for One Nation to wait until the Queensland election. I think 2029 or 2020. I think 2029 is the Queensland election. Don't quote me on that. I'm just going off my memory. But I think that it was wise of One Nation not to run a candidate in this by-election. But that's the three by-elections that I wanted to cover in this. There's 78% of the vote counted, updated 4 minutes ago. I think I'm going to call it for the Labor Party. It's unlikely that Fiona Hammond with the LNP will win. All 16 centres are reporting a preference counts, and they're reporting primaries. Yep. So I don't think many people have called this yet, but it's very likely it'll go to the ALP. And last but not least, I want to cover one last poll. We haven't talked about polling for a while on Biz Politics. I've been meaning to do this podcast for a while, but I really just wanted to wait until all 3 by-elections were finished. So, the most recent federal poll for the next Australian federal election, this is the first ever time that one nation has overtaken the 2 major parties sitting in first, or any party that's overtaken this is the first time that any party has overtaken the ALP or the LNP, and now sitting in the 30s, 32% of primary. This was done by Roy Morgan from the 13th to the 14th of May. SMS interview mode, sample size just over 2,300. The ALP dropping back to a 28.5%. The LNP sitting on 16.5%. The Greens on 11.5%. Nothing too much there. They've been sitting around that sort of area for a while. Then One Nation jumping up to 32%. And in the 2-party preferred vote, we have the ALP versus One Nation at the ALP on a 51 and One Nation on 49. The LNP versus One Nation with a 49 to 51. So One Nation coming away there with the win. And the ALP versus LNP 55 to 45. So what we saw in the Australian federal election is very much similar there, except the LNP has dropped off in primary votes. We've seen One Nation dropping off a bit with some 21s, 24s, 22s, so low 20s. This is the first poll where they've been in the 30s and first poll where they've ever overtaken the Labor Party, sitting now in first place. And if we look at the graph, it just shows a gradual decline with some steep drop-offs in the Liberal coalition, Liberal National Coalition, and then we can see a nice steep rise in One Nation and some slow declines in Labor. So look, I think both major parties should be concerned, but I think the real testing of the waters was the Farrer by-election, and we did see some major political demolition there. But I got to say, the next big few tests will be the Victorian election in November, and in March next year coming up, we have the New South Wales election, which I don't want to get into New South Wales politics. It is just so complicated. But look, we'll get into that as it comes around. I'm really curious to see who they have leading the Victorian One Nation campaign. I hope they choose a strong candidate, and we'll see if we can get a new government in Victoria, which the Daniel Andrews, Jacinta Allen government has been around for a very long time. And they've had multiple landslides. But the polling suggests this is the time for the Labor Party to seize control of Victoria. That's all for Biz Politics today. If you have any questions or concerns, let us know. DM us on Instagram at biz_politics. You can check us out on LinkedIn, YouTube, and of course the Lockdown Biz is where you can listen in wherever you get your podcasts. And I will see you guys over on 2 of my other podcasts, Biz by the Water and Biz Audio.